Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. In Moscow, Donald Trump's envoys, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, meet Vladimir Putin about a possible Ukraine peace deal. In Brussels, NATO foreign ministers struggle to maintain unity. As the Secretary-General says, the alliance isn't yet ready to welcome Ukraine. On the front line, Russia and Ukraine present conflicting narratives about territorial gains, with Moscow claiming new advances. To help unpack this complex picture, we're joined by Matthew Day. He's our senior online editor at TVP World. Matthew, great to have you back. Thanks for taking the time.
Always happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So before we kick off, President Zelenskyy is actually talking in the Irish Parliament. Let's just pop over there and see what he has to say for a minute or two.
Okay.
With stolen Ukrainian land or kidnapped Ukrainian children. Please continue supporting all efforts to make the tribunal for Russia's aggression a reality, so that one day it truly begins its work, and so that Russian killers cannot freely travel the world as if they have done nothing wrong. We must protect the unity that has existed since 2022, a unity of different nations united in the protection of life and justice. And we are speaking about the future. There is no good future for Europe without this unity. Ukraine wants to stand together with those whose history, values, struggle reflect our own. We want to stand alongside Ireland in the European Union as equals. And I'm confident that this will happen. Europe cannot run away from its own values.
Okay. I mean, that sounds like quite a powerful speech that President Zelenskyy is giving there. But before I come to you for your take, we've got Alex Carrier standing by in Brussels. He's been reporting on the NATO foreign ministers meeting there. Let's see what he has to say. Alex, hi. How's it going there? What's happening?
Good to hear you. We've been looking forward to that foreign ministers meeting happening tomorrow. A lot going on in Brussels, of course. In the context of that peace deal. I'm sure we'll talk about that more, Ashim, but certainly an important moment for the alliance, as we mentioned. A meeting that was actually supposed to be directed and organizing more support for Ukraine. We've heard that Poland will be, among other countries, committing several hundreds of millions of euros in military support through NATO's Pearl initiative. That's an initiative that allows NATO allies to buy American military equipment and have it sent rather quickly to Ukraine. That, of course, overshadowed by those peace talks by Steve Witkoff in Moscow, and a lot of people asking the NATO Secretary-General, what can you tell us about the peace talks? What will this mean for Europe? What will this mean for the alliance? Mark Rutte repeatedly asked and repeatedly effectively saying we are in consultation with the United States, but the less the SecGen says, the better, because these are sensitive negotiations. It's also important to say that not all NATO allies are, as they say, in the room when it comes to those negotiations. France, the UK, Germany, obviously clued in and in discussions with the US, but other NATO allies really sidelined still in these discussions. We know that Poland may need to play an important role logistically after any peace deal is reached, because Poland may be a key logistics hub for other European military presences in the region, be it as a peacekeeping force, be it as a monitoring force, be it to train Ukrainian forces. Of course, we don't know the details because the peace plan hasn't yet been agreed, but a high-stakes meeting certainly here in Brussels of those foreign ministers. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte saying very clearly that there is a desire for peace negotiated by the United States, but details still pretty thin on the ground, at least in terms of the role NATO will play. In the meantime, more pledges of support from European partners, Ashim.
Understood. Thanks for that, Alex. Now, as you just said, formal statements are one thing, but you're there on the ground. Are you picking up any undercurrents? What is the feeling about the US getting involved in these peace talks? Does NATO get this feeling of being sidelined by US-Russian talks at all?
Well, I think some individual allies will feel frustrated with the process. Now, it's important to say the NATO alliance itself, NATO as an organization, would not be necessarily involved in these diplomatic talks. It is effectively an administrative, the NATO alliance, the NATO headquarters, Mark Rutte, all that is key to the running of the defensive alliance that is NATO. That's joint operations, joint training, making sure that tactics are aligned, that militaries can work together, but they are not expected to be leading any kind of diplomatic efforts. That will go down to individual allies. But clearly, over the last few weeks, there's been frustration from NATO allies, members of NATO, including Germany, the UK, Poland, France, in how these talks are going forward. Of course, that 28-point plan, the first draft of the plan, caused quite a lot of alarm within European leaders, within European diplomatic circles, because, of course, it asked for rather large, if not unacceptable, concessions from the Ukrainian side. Not many concessions from the Russian side. At least that was the perception from many European leaders. Now, as Mark Rutte said earlier today, the 28-point peace plan is behind us. The Ukrainians and European diplomats, notably the UK, Germany, France, engaging in those discussions, changing what is demanded of the Ukrainians. But again, we understand from diplomatic sources, Poland may have a role to play, but is not necessarily consulted in a lot of these discussions. So one thing the NATO foreign ministers meeting could provide is a forum for NATO allies to ask the United States what's happening, what's going to be this peace plan, how might it impact European security, because, of course, particularly eastern flank countries in Europe feel very strongly that the war in Ukraine will not be the end of Russia's aggression in Europe. Speaking to eastern flank diplomats, Lithuanian diplomats, Baltic states, all very concerned of further Russian aggression, be it in conventional warfare or with hybrid attacks like we've seen in Poland. They want to have a clear sense of how European security will be assured in the next few weeks, months, years, if not decades. And therefore, engagement from the US is crucial. Now, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State from the US, will not be at the NATO foreign ministers meeting. He will be replaced by a deputy. Now, diplomats behind the scenes playing that down. It is not a sign that the US is not engaging with NATO allies. It's
Alex,
simply the fact that Marco Rubio couldn't make it to Brussels. So clearly, a lot to discuss over the next few days.
That's great. Thank you so much for that analysis, Alex. And we look forward to you keeping us informed. Have a good day.
And you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Lot to unpack there. Let's start with President Zelensky's speech. What were the main things? There was a very short clip there. What were the main things that struck you?
Well, I think he's he's painting the broader picture, saying that when it comes to any peace deal, there has to be some form of justice. I think he was referring to that. And also that Europe has to stand up for its values as well. So I think he is reminding the Irish Parliament and through them, Europe as a whole, that when it comes to this, we can't sacrifice European values. And European values, of course, are Ukrainian values. And these values might be on the line if a peace deal doesn't work or an incorrect peace deal is signed, or a peace deal that is signed that is beneficial to the United States, beneficial to Russia, and then which is not beneficial to Ukraine and not beneficial to Europe as well, which is a big fear.
Yeah, it certainly is all round. What are the Americans and the Russians cooking up? I mean, if I could put it so crudely, but that is a concern. Now, one of the things that, when I heard about President Zelensky's visit to Dublin, one of the things that struck me was, you've got this kind of really major meeting going on in Brussels with NATO foreign ministers. You've got the meetings in Moscow, between Putin and the American envoys. And yet, President Zelenskyy has decided to go to Dublin. Surprising choice, or maybe not? I don't know.
Surprising choice, but I think he's just sort of working his way around European capitals, and Ireland is a European capital, and therefore it should be visited.
Right. Yeah. The other thing was about. So I've got a quote here from Mark Rutte, and I'll just read it out quickly. Ukraine clearly applied for membership, but we also know, as I said, and this is a practical statement of practicality, a statement of fact, and that there is no unanimity within the alliance about Ukraine coming in. So no unanimity. Now, what do you think the obstacles are here? I'm asking you to look at a crystal ball, obviously, Matt.
Well, I think the obstacles are certain NATO countries don't want Ukraine within NATO. I'm sure Hungary is one of them, maybe Slovakia as well. And that will remain the case until their governments change, which quite possibly in the case of Hungary, they have a general election in April, and therefore they might vote in a government which may favour Ukraine a lot more than the current Hungarian government. But for the time being, it will be Ukraine's dream of being a NATO member remains a dream until you have unanimity, and even quite possibly, of course, talking about getting unanimity, the United States will probably block it as well under the current Trump administration.
Well, so it would seem, considering how cosy the US is currently, or President Trump is with Putin. Now, the other thing was that Turkey, of course, that's another unknown quantity. They're in NATO, and they could block Ukraine's accession to NATO, and they're actually playing quite a kind of a middle of the road a game here, aren't they? They're working on both sides of the fence, the Russian and the. How do you think they feel about Ukraine's joining NATO?
Well, Turkey has been trying to play this game of diplomat, trying to portray itself as a moderator because it's got close ties with Russia and also it's a NATO member. So in a way, it has a boot in both camps. How long that can continue, of course, I'm not too sure. Like I know the Turkish president, Mr. Erdogan, he was very angry with Ukraine in the past couple of days because the Ukrainian Navy and Special Forces launched these marine drone attacks on vessels of the Russian Shadow Fleet that were within Turkish waters. Turkey was very unhappy with that. But I'm afraid they're just going to have to accept that that's what happens in a war.
Right.
These vessels are play a role in fueling Russia's war against Ukraine, and therefore Ukraine had every right to attack them.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's a little unfortunate that they were in Turkish waters, but there you go. As you say, all sorts of things happen in war that may not be intended. Now, on the battlefield, we're hearing conflicting reports from the Russians and Ukrainians, which in itself are not, is not new. But this is important because there are two key towns, Pokrovsk and Vovchansk. Now, Moscow says they've occupied them. Ukraine says, well, they haven't. Now, the reason these towns are key is, of course, because of their geographical locations as hubs and so on. And, controlling those could make a substantial difference in logistics of the war. What can you share with us on that?
Well, I think one thing, particularly when it comes to Pokrovsk, it's a ruin now. It's not really a logistics hub. That time is gone. It's just been reduced to rubble. And of course, for the Russians, when you have Mr. Witkov arriving in Moscow, they wanted a nice headline. They wanted a nice, showy picture of a Russian soldier with a Russian flag, apparently in the middle of Pokrovsk, saying, yeah, we've captured the town. That will fit in very nicely with the Russian narrative, saying, yeah, we're advancing all the time. This narrative they've been really, really keen to push with the Trump administration, particularly with Trump, which says they're winning the war. Of course, it ignores the sort of fundamentals of the battlefield at the moment. We have an urban warfare. It's a very fragmented front line as well. So it is quite possible that the Russians could kind of sneak a couple of guys in there. They wave their flag and then they're out of there ASAP before a Ukrainian drone hits them and wipes them out.
Well, you do hear those stories, don't you?
Yeah, and of course Ukraine has said, no, the city has not fallen, fighting continues, and probably fighting has continued. The Ukrainians are on a back foot in that city without a shadow of a doubt, and it could fall completely at some point. But for the time being, the city fights on. And bear in mind that the Russians are sort of been talking about getting this city for, I don't know, it seems like weeks. Well, actually, they've been fighting for years, months now to get this city.
Yes.
And Ukrainians are still holding on and still exacting a huge body count on the Russians at the same time.
Well, you know, this is what stuns me, that the Russians are prepared to put up with such losses and still keep on coming. I know they're throwing everything that they have, including the kitchen sink, on the front lines. But even so, how is Putin managing to keep, you know, his domestic audience kind of in the dark about these numbers?
Well, he has complete control over all forms of media within Russia, and he needs to keep the true casualty figure secret. Of course, in wars generally, casualty figures are kept secret or tightly controlled by both sides. Like Ukraine rarely talks about how many people on its side have been killed and wounded and captured. It will be a lot, but it'll be a lot smaller compared to the Russian figure. Bear in mind that the Russians are the ones that are advancing, they're the ones that are attacking. And of course, in war, generally, the attacking side loses a lot more than the defending side. And Russia seems to be prepared to tolerate a huge amount of casualties. Well, actually, no, I should rephrase that. Putin is prepared to tolerate a huge amount of Russian casualties. His administration, his regime is prepared to tolerate tens of thousands of Russian soldiers, young men dying all the time, because it's in their vested interest to tolerate that. Because if they don't tolerate it, then there could be upheaval within Moscow.
Well, he's in a position where he can't really back out now, isn't he?
No, he can't. The state he has helped build, which has also provided him with a huge amount of wealth, it has a bit of sting in its tail that he can't retire from the Kremlin gracefully and go out to go somewhere nice and warm and spend his days there, looking back on what a wonderful time he did and what great things he did for Russia. No, he knows, because of the regime that he has created, he will either leave the Kremlin either in a box or in a prison van. Probably one of the two.
If he's lucky in a prison van.
Yeah. I said in a box is the other option.
Yeah.
And therefore he has to fight on. It's in his vested interest to fight on.
Yeah, I mean, nonetheless, I hear what you're saying about, you know, controlling the media, but, you know, you have families receiving bodies or with, you know, their soldiers, their men not coming back. So there must be a general understanding that the numbers are huge. But nonetheless, Matt, you know, we shall be watching and reporting as always. Thank you so much, as always, for coming along.
Happy to be here.
Take care. And that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.